So it feels really special for me to be presenting on Tom's legacy and his theories here at the Society for Prevention Research meeting, because a few years after I completed my postdoctoral training with Tom, we were both on the board of directors of SPR together for about 2 years, because at the time I had been elected as the chair of the Early Career Preventionist Network, and he was elected as a board member. So it was really nice a few years after leaving his lab to be able to reconnect twice a year and, talk about how things were going. And of course, I still needed the mentorship, and I still do today. So it was when he came to see me and how is it going and chit-chatting, he was, at some point he told me, wow, so it is great to see how involved you are in SPR and in ECPN. And, this is important. And it was very validating for me because he was not telling me, all this time you're putting in ECPN, you should be writing grants and papers. Actually, he was himself a really good role model. He was really busy, but he made time in his schedule to serve on the board member and to serve SPR in many different ways, like committees and task forces. So his actions also showed that SPR mattered to him and that your work also in SPR was valued by Tom. So now I'm going to move on with my presentation about Tom Dishion's peer theories, which have been an inspiration for current work and also I think, will be an inspiration for future prevention research. So the first part of my talk will be presenting a few influential peer theories. And if you are less familiar with those theories, there's a paper that has been highly cited, published a few years ago, that I refer you to for reading. And also when Greg invited me to do the presentation, I was like, well, I'm not the only one who has been inspired by Tom's peer theories, of course. So I'd like to broaden maybe the scope of the presentation a little bit. So I went to see François Poulain, who is one of my colleagues in my department at the University of Québec at Montreal, because François had also been a postdoc with Tom about 10 years before I was in Oregon. And we, it's nice to have a close colleague like that who had a similar experience to me. So François unfortunately could not be here this year. He was planning to be here, but family scheduling with two people being professors and having conferences at the same time, unfortunately, he's not here. But he contributed to this presentation, and you'll see at the end how he felt that Tom's peer theories influenced his own work. So the first peer theory I want to talk about today is the deviancy training theory. So, adolescents are just like us. They are social beings. They want company. They want attention. And in teenage years, breaking the rules, testing the limits, it's pretty common. And if you have a youth who has kind of deviant tendencies, maybe he or she is going to try to get attention by engaging in deviant behavior or talking about deviant things. And this can be quite efficient in getting positive attention and positive reactions from other peers with deviant tendencies. And I remember Tom was often saying, when we look at videotaped observations of deviant youth, you see somebody says something deviant, the other person laughs, and that's a really good reinforcement for that behavior to happen again. And it's just pure behavioral theories. If you do something and you get a positive reinforcement for it, it's going to reappear, so the behavior will be reenacted and pushed a little bit further every time. So from cigarette smoking, we can move towards using drugs, and the other person will also want to get that kind of positive reinforcement from his or her friend or peer group and then engage also in more and more deviant or delinquent behavior, so using other substances and maybe moving towards like stealing stuff or not coming home at night or skipping schools. So yes, deviancy training, like this concept, really developed when looking at deviant behavior. But then, when you think about it, why would that be only working for deviant behavior? So this is when the peer contagion theory developed. Like, so Tom and his colleagues started developing this theory, and many other researchers have been using this concept and showing that this back and forth reinforcement of some families of similar behaviors between friends or peer groups. We see that unfold for a range of different outcomes. So some studies have shown that peer contagion has been observed for disordered eating. It has also been observed in the development of depressive mood. Some of you have certainly heard about co-rumination, so two people ruminating about negative thoughts and then kind of reinforcing each other, encouraging each other to move in this path towards rumination, which increases depressive mood. Also, when you think about deviant behavior, you think about more externalizing type of behavior, like very observable behavior. But peer contagion has also been observed for indirect aggression, social aggression, like rumor spreading. But when you think about it, perhaps peer contagion could also be a good thing. So some research has more recently emerged showing that peer contagion could also explain how aggression decreases in peer groups, or how, maybe pro-social behavior, like cooperative behavior, could be reinforced by the peer group. So I think it's nice to expand the concept of deviancy training, which builds towards harmful outcomes for the youth or people around him or her to other behaviors that can build up towards positive outcomes in the longer term. One thing that should be mentioned about peer contagion is, well, I guess a warning for prevention scientists. In the mid-1990s, Tom published influential papers about how peer contagion could really make some interventions backfire when you try to put together a group of deviant youth and intervene on them. You have to be expecting the deviancy training to start emerging, because these are kids who are used to getting positive attention for deviant behavior. So if you are not prepared for that, if the adults that are conducting the intervention are not ready to break the cycle of deviancy training as soon as it starts and move the behavior towards more pro-social behavior. Or if you, another solution for that, if it's putting one deviant youth in a peer group where the norm is not deviant behavior but pro-social behavior. So that is another thing that prevention scientists can do to protect against that. But in different settings, school settings, summer camps, or even juvenile delinquent centers, we have seen some of that deviancy training and peer contagion negatively affecting the outcomes of some preventive interventions for deviant youth. So we know that peer influence from a developmental perspective tends to increase and peak in adolescent years. And then, well, it doesn't disappear, but it kind of goes down a little bit in adulthood. However, the impact of negative peer influence can be much more long-lasting than just the adolescent years. You can just think about youth who, for example, start using cigarettes when they're teenagers, and then they move on to more harmful substances. They could have longer-term health issues, or they could go to jail because of that, and then, meet other people who are criminals and just move towards increasingly antisocial behavior during adulthood. So even though peer influence peaks in adolescence, we have to try and prevent negative peer contagion to protect youth development way into adulthood. So this led Tom to think about peer theories, like, for example, peer contagion, not just as a very circumscribed theory, but as a piece that could be integrated in other studies that look at the development of youth, like from a much broader perspective. So, for example, we have included deviancy training in a paper that was based on evolutionary theories, looking at how peers could influence premature parenthood, for example. And another theory that I have been using since then is the developmental cascade theory. One paper that I collaborated on with Tom looked at the Project Alliance 1 sample, and we saw that when kids start in middle school and show signs of maladjustment and social marginalization, then they're more likely to get involved in gangs a little bit later on. And this cascade down into deviancy training a little bit later in adolescence, and we measured that using videotaped observations of deviancy training. And further down the cascade, we have been able to show that deviancy training mediated the earlier gang involvement and predicted violent behavior in early adulthood. And here I'm talking about violent behavior that has been measured using criminal records, so real, very severe violent behavior. So you can see that deviancy training here is a peer theory that is being integrated in a broader developmental framework. Now, in terms of inspiration for future work in the field of prevention science, I started talking a little bit about the fact that peer contagion might actually be a good thing if you look at peers as a possible source of socialization for pro-social behavior. Some studies have shown that positive mood could be socialized between friends in adults. And I have always been interested in academic outcomes. So currently I'm working on a study where I'm trying to see whether peer contagion can play a role in predicting educational attainment in early adulthood. So here's the model we have used, and I'm still working on it because still running additional analysis, but I'm going to show you preliminary findings. So what we have measured is problem behavior and academic achievement in middle school, and how this predicts the association with best friends that are more or less adjusted. So we looked at best friends, problem behavior, and academic achievement. And our hypothesis based on the developmental cascade is that having friends who are well-adjusted will strengthen the path toward better academic achievement and less problem behavior later on in high school. And this could lead in adulthood to better educational attainment, so going further in school, obtaining a higher degree. And right now, our results show that the positive adjustment route is the one that comes out. So yes, peers contribute to future adjustment as part of this broader developmental cascade, but following the path of good school adjustment predicts associations with well-adjusted friends, and this strengthens the ability to do well in school later on in high school and stay in school longer. I'm going to talk now about how François Poulain told me that Tom's peer theories has influenced his work. So François thought that deviancy training, it's a great theory. A lot of people know about this theory, but a lot of the deviancy training measures are based on videotaped observations where we can see the back and forth mutual influence between deviant peers, but not everybody can do videotaped observations. It's long, it's expensive, you need staff to do that. And in smaller labs, perhaps a self-report of deviancy training would be more efficient, and this could help spread the measures of deviancy training to a larger number of researchers in the field. So François and his former student and my current student actually have published a paper about that. François is very interested in organized activities, for example, extracurricular activities that are supervised by adults after school. And he sees that as a possible way to help move deviant teenagers towards more positive peer groups and break the deviancy training phenomenon. If you put a deviant youth with peers who do not reinforce the deviant behavior, who just don't react to it, don't think it's cool, then the deviant behavior is less likely to happen again. And this deviant youth will probably look at the people in the same organized activities as she is participating in, and see, okay, what gets positive attention here, like doing well in sports or doing well in other creative activities. Okay, so if that's what I need to have friends and get attention, well, that's what I'm going to do. So in conclusion, this was just really a small glimpse of how Tom's peer research has influenced me and François. But there are so many other things we've been talking about and looking at, like peer rejection, peer acceptance, cliques. So just in 20 minutes, it's really just a little bit, but I hope it will continue to influence many other peer researchers and prevention scientists in the future. Thank you.